Hello, welcome back to the Wednesday Child podcast. Time for another episode now, and you are joined by your co-host Sarah Ledger and Debbie Watson, and we are going to chat to you today about how you can be proactive in recovery. We're a couple of weeks into the new year, and it's time to look at where your momentum is at and what you can do in terms of influencing your progress for the year ahead. And that's about the people you surround yourself with, the decisions that you make, and really kind of stepping up to the plate, seeing what we can be responsible for. So we'll move on to that in just a second, but let me introduce Sarah again. Hi Sarah, how are you?
Hello, I'm all right, but don't tell the boss, Debbie, because this is during the day.
It's a sneaky lunchtime job, isn't it?
I know. Well, it's a bit past lunch, mind, but it doesn't matter. No one needs to know.
No. We'll keep it quiet. It's only between you, me, and maybe a handful of listeners, but what do they care? So, tell me how your week is going so far. Big birthday in your family?
Yeah, Amy was 14 yesterday.
Oh,
14. Can you remember being 14, Debbie?
Oh, goodness. I was quite like a meek, mild little 14-year-old, but I desperately wanted to be one of the popular ones. I can tell you that much.
I remember I was into my performing arts and I was Mrs. K in Willie Russell's Our Day Out. It was the big school show, and I got the leading lady. Very exciting.
Bless you.
Yeah, I remember year 9 was a big year for me because of that.
And what did birthday look like? Because you're kind of a sole parent this week, aren't you? Because James,
Yeah,
what was it
I've
like?
lost.
Is that the first time you've done kind of big birthday while you've been on your own with Amy?
Um, yes, it is actually. Yes, I've lost my wingman this week. He's working away. Interestingly enough, that's not James's. Well, it's James's first time being away from Amy, but obviously he was single parenting while she had birthdays whilst I was in treatment.
Oh,
So,
did you miss birthdays while you were in
yeah, I
treatment?
did.
Oh,
Yeah,
bless you.
unfortunately,
That
yeah.
must have been
So,
really awful.
yeah, I remember one time they let me out. Let me out. That sounds terrible. What they did, let me out to go and pick her up. I had a couple of hours so I could go and pick her up from school, and I took her to a cafe, and that was her actual birthday. But then I had to drop her back and get taken back to the services. So,
Oh my goodness, it's
yeah.
making me feel really sad just thinking about what that must have been like. Oh,
But last night wasn't like that, thanks to recovery. So we had a really nice time actually. We just had a tea party and had some nice girl time. So it was really lovely.
chick flick and kind of takeaway food.
Yeah, don't tell the censorship people, but we're actually halfway through watching High Fidelity, which is very much a 15, but she's into her records, Amy. So it's quite nice thing. So anyone who knows High Fidelity will know what the record link is. So yeah, so we're watching bits of that.
It's interesting, isn't it? So when you get to a certain age and you think back to all the films that you looked at and you watched at a certain age, and like I know now my nieces are asking about the films that their mum and I talk about as the cult films, like your Dirty Dancing and your Pretty Woman and those kind of ones, and you suddenly go, oh no, you can't watch that because that's got a sex scene in it. Oh my goodness, no. And yeah, I'm sure we watched that kind of relatively young when we were certainly like,
Definitely.
yeah,
Definitely. But no,
interesting.
yeah, it's that kind of thing. Like, what do we censor? Because obviously, especially in our community, within eating disorders, Amy is bombarded by diet talk and all of that kind of thing daily on all of her social media channels and all of the TV and everything like that. And yet, someone says a swear word before 9 o'clock, and we flinch. And it's kind of it's I think it's a really interesting one as to what we just, without even realizing it, as adults we let our teenagers see, and then the things that we still say that they shouldn't see.
Yeah,
Weird.
absolutely. It's kind of wanting to police certain aspects of their life and then assuming they're old enough and, sensible enough to navigate the other bits that
Yeah, exactly.
it's strange, isn't it? So we're going to use this episode just to kind of push on with perhaps where we started with our first episode of the year, which was obviously talking about kind of, pushing on in 2023. But I really want to try and help everyone to keep going and move that momentum forward. I know several people have been in touch to say that they listened to our first podcast episode of the year like several times just to kind of kickstart themselves. Maybe that's because they hadn't heard our voices for a few weeks and they thought they'd put up with
They
us for a
missed
few more
us.
times. Yeah, put it on repeat. But kind of wanted to take it on and move it a step forward by looking about what we can influence and where we can assert our own power in our recovery and what that looks like in terms of people, in terms of decision making and the processes and tactics we put in place. One of the aspects of that I think is sometimes when you've been through poor mental health, you can feel that sense of helplessness, like it's not possible to move forward. And I think if we're not careful, we can get stuck in a trap of thinking, without this therapist, this circumstance, this member of the family, this routine, I cannot move forward. So we can become trapped by the conditions of what we think is our own recovery requirement. Do you relate to that? Can you see where that sometimes happens? And certainly in the relationships we have with people in the community, do you see where that sometimes comes up and we have to nudge people away from those kind of rigid thinking processes?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially when it becomes a person, and that is harder to break and to nudge yourself away from. So whether you've become like you've hung your recovery on a therapist, or you've hung your recovery on a sibling or a best friend, I think they're the difficult ones to break, because it ends up feeling like a period of grief. Like, you've literally lost somebody, and or well, it can be two things, can't it? It can be that your poorly self is grieving because by hanging your recovery on somebody else, you're actually not getting recovered.
Yeah.
But your true self is like really, really shouting and thankful for the fact that that's happened, but that's not being able to be heard. I think we also then obviously have like the constant need to break routine, and the constant need to break the type of food that we're eating, and the constant need to break the fact that we can't eat in front of people, or we have to eat at certain set times. I think they're two different things. There's the breaking of the routines and the rituals, there's the breaking of the behaviors, then there's actually physically breaking bonds with folks that are no longer serving our recovery, and or have become that much of a crutch
Yeah.
that they're not allowing us to move forward. But they're not doing that purposefully. They probably don't know they're doing that.
But it's like anything, you can relate that to peer groups in school, can't you?
Yeah, of
That
course.
we go through a passage of our life where I think, someone once said to me that people are in your life for like a reason or a season or a lifetime. So there's kind of sometimes we have a relationship with someone because it's just for a period, and actually when we look back, it helped us get through that particular chapter. Or sometimes it's just, it works for a phase of our life, and then others are lifetime friends that we maybe come and go from, but they're kind of always there, in some ways in the background or the foreground at different times.
That's actually a nice way of looking at recovery in a way, reason, season, and lifetime. That there often are for many of us a reason why we get into this particular mental health strand. It only needs to last a season, though. It certainly shouldn't last a lifetime. It's
Yeah.
quite a nice little triangle to think about, almost like helps to accept the fact that there has been something on our journey that's led us to this particular illness.
Yeah.
But it's just there for a particular season, and it's certainly not there for a lifetime. But obviously that journey, that's where the proactivity and the grit and the hard work has to really kick in.
Yeah, and sometimes maybe there's a necessity to look at, okay, there's the reason that created the season, and now let me look at my lifetime, and kind of how do I kick on, how do I push forward? And I think for me, in terms of having to find that push forward, it was about looking, well, what's around me? Who am I around? What's going on in my life? And where do I have to stop passing blame or waiting for something to happen, or putting responsibility into someone else's or something else's hands? So,
Yeah.
well, it's because of my job that it makes it really difficult to recover. Oh, well, it's because this relationship is really tricky that I've naturally found I can't let go of this eating disorder. Or it's because I live in this particular circumstance. I think we can all do that to some extent. And it's only when, unfortunately, it's the cycle with eating disorder recovery, because of, like, we talk about the kind of neural rewiring versus the nutritional rehabilitation. There has to be some kind of cognitive rationality, if you like, that says, no, I really have to deploy some kind of genuine cognitive function to this and say, this isn't right. This is not appropriate for me to lay blame at this door or that door. I have to assess where my life is at and make that kind of forward step based on what's appropriate and necessary for my forward thinking. Whereas I think when the nutritional rehabilitation hasn't happened, we stay in that cognitive, you and I often sort of say it's kind of that mind funk, isn't it? It's cloudy, it's difficult to get through, and then you can't rationalize, what do I need to do next to get myself beyond this? And that's when we stay in that stupor and the behaviors carry on.
And I've been in services where I've heard people say, and I can't remember saying it, but I probably have said it, or I'm waiting until I can see the dietitian. I'm waiting until I can see a therapist. I'm waiting until I get some occupational health. I'm waiting until I see the nurse. And I think obviously when your mind is foggy, it's you can't think of these things. But I think looking back and reflecting, I certainly, before I started my real and active recovery, I certainly forgot that recovery is actually a verb. It's a
Ooh,
doing word,
yeah.
it's not a passive action, and it's not something that happens to it's a doing word, it's a verb. So
Yeah.
therefore it implies in its heart and its nature that this is going to take some sort of effort because of the fact that it's actually a verb. And nobody can do that for you because it has to take that personal action.
Not done to you. It is
Yeah,
done by you.
it's done by you. It's not even done with you. It's done by you, because something that's with you, yeah, you're part and parcel, but you're still reliant on that other person that's there to kind of push you in the right direction. And at times, we need that other person, whether it's a physical person or whether it's a really good book that's leading you on the right path, or whether it's a really incredibly purposeful influencer and YouTube channel or whatever. We all have a guide on the side at certain points in our recovery that gives us that momentum to help us get over the next step. I suppose in many ways, Debbie, that's what we are. We're someone's guide on the side.
Yeah,
But
perhaps even when we don't realise it.
yeah, exactly. But ultimately, it is a verb. We have to take responsibility. I used to always say to myself, it's not your fault you got ill, but it is your fault if you don't choose to get better. And I know that word of choice, some people are going to listen to that and they're going to start screaming and shouting and
Oh,
putting all
this is
sorts
where
in the
I get
inbox.
emails saying,
I know.
I really don't like that Sarah's
And you get
on.
the
I
emails,
get
not
all the
me.
emails. I get all the emails saying, I take a real offence to you if I don't choose to be ill. How dare you say
So
this?
you don't choose, none of us choose to be ill. None of us choose to be ill. But the one thing about eating disorders is we can be actively involved in our own recovery. And if we don't take responsibility to become actively involved and seek all the support and the help and the toolkit and everything else that we talk about, but you still have to put yourself right in the center of that process. And remember, recovery is a verb and it takes action in order to get out of it on the other side. You're not necessarily going to solve all of your mental health needs, but by getting yourself nutritionally rehabilitated, like you said, Debbie, and then focusing on the rewiring, you are going to lessen the eating disorder voice without a shadow of a doubt.
And I think there are, as simplistic as it sounds, I think there are some tactics that can be deployed in that. And for me, it was always about, we often talk on this, don't we, about how can we crunch it down? Because when you look at the enormity of an eating disorder, particularly if it's been a long, protracted illness, how do you heal 10 years of an eating disorder and hope that you're going to be better by the summer? Well, that's not an easy fix. And we all know it's not about a bottle of tablets. It's not about a magic wand. But for me, and I'm sure for you in many ways, it's kind of deploying that logical brain, saying, okay, I'm not as well and as recovered and perhaps as rational as I would like to be in 6 months' time, when I hope all these decision processes are going to be easier and my pushing my momentum, forward is going to be easier. But in this very moment, what can I do? And I think for me, some of the stuff that really helps is saying, in the next 20 minutes, what can I do that changes the way I feel and think? In the next hour, what could I do that stops where my head is spinning with this? How could I make the next 24 hours of my life be better in terms of my recovery rather than worse? In a week's time, what could I do so that I am in a better place to maintain recovery? A month from now, what would I be doing? And I know that it sounds incredibly specific and almost a bit too trite and too simplistic, but I think sometimes we have to pull it down to that. So it is that kind of, in the next half an hour, rather than choosing to sit here crying or force myself to put trainers on to go out in the pouring rain for another bloody 5-mile walk, I can choose to sit down and put my favorite movie on and have a couple of digestive biscuits and a hot chocolate and just calm my brain. In the next 24 hours, I will give myself a calming bath and a telephone conversation with a best friend who I know will hear me, will just hear me. In a week's time, I will have made an appointment with my GP or a therapist or my befriender to get me back on track, or I will have bought my journal to start writing how I am feeling. In a month from now, I will have booked an overnight break with a friend to change my routine and at least have a cafe trip or a restaurant or a night out to just change the four walls that I'm seeing around me. I mean, these, as I say, it's really simplistic, but I think sometimes we are stuck in the prisons we build around ourselves. And we just have to say, how can I jolt myself out of where I am?
And what are the hinge behaviors within that prison that could have the biggest impact on other behaviors? We've talked a lot, haven't we, about really boiling it down to a handful of really key behaviors that, if you just change that thing, that the possibility that would open up for the other behaviors that would follow would be huge and would be a massive recovery win. So one of my hinge behaviors was stopping weighing bread. The second I stopped weighing bread, I could walk into the kitchen and feed myself by simply getting something out of a cupboard and putting it into my mouth. The second I stopped weighing bread, it meant that it was a gateway to having sandwiches again. The second I stopped weighing bread was a gateway to my brain saying, you were weighing bread. Like that was you, Sarah. You were 40 odd and you were weighing bread. And so those, weighing yourself in the morning was one off for lots of people. It's such a huge hinge behavior. Being able to put spread on things. Like, what are the real key things? Not just that in themselves are an important behavior, but allow other behaviors to be shifted and built upon.
Yeah.
Adds to then that momentum and feeling like you're always actively and productively engaged in your recovery. Because when you look at the big stuff, it becomes overwhelming. But when you nail it down to a handful of real key hinge behaviors, you can work on those like you would work on anything in life.
Yeah. And for me to discover some of those, I used to do this thing, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but sometimes kind of thinking, what are the things that I do that I would be heartily embarrassed about if my best friends in the world, have you just had a power cut there?
No, it's just got really dark, so I'm trying to put my phone camera on, my
Out of it
torch. Look,
speaking.
ooh.
Um, sorry for anybody that's not visually seeing it and is just listening to this in your ears. So for me, it was things about like, what are the things that I do that I know if a best friend or someone that whose opinion I really respect could have a camera and was spying on me and they were witnessing that, what would they think was really odd? And what am I not? I struggle with the word saying I'm ashamed of, but at least I'm not proud that this is where I am at in life. So there were certain things. And for me, I made some really specific decisions, some of which were perhaps you could argue against medical advice. So one thing that I don't think worked for me, and I don't think I've ever really talked hugely to you about doctor check-ins, and maybe that's because you did a bit of outpatient where I didn't have, you did day therapy,
Yeah,
didn't you?
day
And I
service
didn't
afterwards,
have
yeah.
day services. So I went straight from treatment centre to kicked out, and then my GP saying, every Wednesday at 8 a.m, come and get weighed and all this. And I recognised sooner than he did that was a really, really dangerous ritual. And because I became obsessed about what weight I would be on that day. And I really realised that although there was good intent, and it's one of the things that when we deliver training for GPs and nurses, I make sure that they're understanding that that's not as sensible a tool as they might think. I can see the purpose of it from a safeguarding perspective, but it becomes somewhat obsessive and it doesn't always help that person move forward. And for me, so that was one of the things I had to pedal back from, and I had to be having those conversations saying, this is really not good, because what I find myself doing is 48 hours before, even though I was doing really well, I see that appointment coming and I panic because you're going to tell me what that weight is. And although I've been doing 5 days of really, really looking after myself, eating really well, suddenly I'm thinking, oh shit, it's all about the numbers again. And I'm going to have to kind of not be okay with that. So that was one of the things I did. And the other thing was cutlery and crockery. I hated that I was a picker and everything was nibbly. And I remember a client once saying to me, and I was still only in my kind of mid-20s, and he said, you're a nibbler, aren't you? And I thought, oh my God, he's kind of spotted me. He said, sometimes I think I should call you the little bird. And I thought, oh, ouch, ouch. I'm an
Wow.
adult, and he spotted me nibbling
Yeah.
at things
Yeah.
rather than using a knife and fork. I thought, my God, like children, use their fingers and eventually get told by their parents, use your sodding
Yeah.
cutlery. And it was kind of, there was the big thing on the healthcare side, having the conversation with the GP and being like, mature enough to say, I get this, doctor, but I think, and he agreed, and it worked for me, kind of extricating myself from that relationship and realizing there was a element of codependency there on that relationship. And then there was that daily behavior about stop bloody picking. Not
Yeah.
that I'm saying I didn't snack, that's different, snacking and picking and
Snacking's different. Yeah. Yeah.
snacking and eating throughout, but being able to pick up a knife and fork, because there's a legitimacy. And what I realized, it was almost my brain saying, you're not allowed an adult portion of something. So
Yeah.
you must pick and not put things on a proper adult plate because you're not entitled to. And as soon as I stopped that behavior, I was back into an adult world of thinking, oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
recovering.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah, I was a nibbler. Mine was the not being allowed an adult portion, but also just wanting the experience of that particular meal to last as long as possible because I'd been waiting for it, for such a long time. And just making a sandwich last for like an hour. That's one of the things they do to you in services, don't they? They make you eat things in really short periods of time to try and break that feeling of things having to be this really long, drawn out process. It's funny you should talk about the doctors as well. I went for an old lady healthy heart check. I am now of the age. And I was sat in the waiting room and it's been ages since I've been at the doctor's, like ages. And I thought, oh shit, this is a healthy heart check. Oh, it's blood pressure, it's weight, it's height. Ooh. And it didn't send me into an eating disorder spiral, but my brain started to go back into that direction because, like you often say, Debbie, you have to always check in with your own recovery because it can come back and bite you without any kind of real reason or rhyme. And I thought, no, come on, Sarah, you're a big girl. You're going to do this. And I walked in and I sat down. It was a wonderful nurse. She was lovely. And she went, hi, how are you doing? And I says, yeah, I'm good, thank you. Said, before we start, though, can I just check, have you read my history? And she kind of smiled and she went, actually, yes, I have. I says, right, okay. And she just turned to me and said, right, so I'm going to list the things that we should do, but we're only going to do the things that you're comfortable in us doing. And she read it, but because I was in control, I got on the scales. She then, rightly so, said, right, the thing actually was just covered by chance. She says, I've got the numbers and I know your weight. Do you want to know it? And I was like, yeah, I've got a healthy mind. Yeah, yeah, let me know. But I just think just that slight taking back the power you're on about, have the power of your own recovery, taking back the power, walking into that doctor surgery and just saying, have you read my notes? Whereas in the past, when I was poorly, I might have had that of not saying anything because you should know, you should know, you should have
Yeah.
read, you should know this.
And then
And
being
then
angry.
yeah, exactly. And then again, I'm not taking responsibility for what I need to be healthy. I'm making someone else almost responsible for that. So I was very proud of myself that day.
I think that's amazing. Yeah, and I think there's a real telling point in that, isn't there, of kind of preventing the opportunities to push yourself into a pity party spiral of
Yeah,
saying, oh, and then the doctor asked for gave me my weight, and I never wanted that, and how dare they, and yada
yeah,
yada yada. This really negative spiral. But instead, you got right in there, gave it a head start, and said, before we get going, here's, I
yeah,
shouldn't necessarily feel I've got to tell you, but I'm going to tell you because I'm a mature patient, and I'm going to tell you this.
yeah, yeah. No, it did. It felt good, I'll be honest. It did feel good. But that's that taking responsibility for recovery. But again, like you said, you've got to be in a less foggy mind in order to be able to do that. And it is hard work and it's everlasting. You wake up 8 o'clock in the morning and then it's still there the second you go back to bed. I was talking to somebody the other day about how recovery had to be my full-time job. And then I chuckled and I was like, no, hang on, because most full-time jobs are 9 to 5. And this was 24 hours for months. So this was way more than a full-time job.
And it does take a while, doesn't it, before you suddenly realize actually it's no longer controlling every waking thought. And
Yeah,
that's really quite freeing moment, isn't it? Just to
yeah,
realize that you're actually living life.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Wow. Well, I hope that's been reasonably helpful for people that want to kind of, move on from where we were with step one, first episode into the new year. We've talked a little bit more about some tactics, some ways to make sure that we're taking control. We're back in, as we've often said before, it's kind of getting back in the driving seat of your own life rather than being driven as the passenger, and really sort of seeing what other things I can do in the next hour, in the next day, the next week, and the next month. And, it is the simple stuff. Like, if the next hour is a struggle for you, well, stick your podcast headphones in your ears and listen back. There's plenty of content. The guy that edits our podcast was saying to me yesterday about, we're kind of 80 odd episodes in now, and just how quickly it's grown our audience, and how well shared it is. And I'm really chuffed about that, because sometimes Sarah and I was going to say talk in the dark, and Sarah really is.
I'm literally sat in the dark here. Have you seen me? This is ridiculous. If I turn my light off, look how dark it is. That's just my torch. It's just the clouds have come in. Middlesbrough is suddenly like apocalyptic outside, it looks.
Exactly. But it's I think that's why I always take great heart. And well, I know we joked there, but that I'm bound to get a few negative messages about some of those earlier comments. But actually, negative or positive, I think the feedback is really, really helpful. It helps influence what topics we focus on. It helps us understand where you are in your recovery, and it helps remind us sometimes that we don't get it nailed on, because there is a tendency sometimes to slip into elements that are too close to our own experiences, and that might be vastly different from some of you that are listening. And so we're never kind of trying to lessen those experiences of yourselves. So different perspectives is always good. So keep reminding us if you don't feel, if you listen back for a handful of podcasts and you think, I don't think they've talked about this, and I'd really like to tell them what this feels like. So what does it feel like to be, I don't know, newly married and having an eating disorder? You've just found out you're pregnant, or you found out you'll never have children, or you've just had an eating disorder diagnosis for the first time at 75 years of age, or you're a mother of a 12-year-old who's now got an eating disorder. Whatever it is, please do share that experience with us and help us know some of the topics that you'd really like us to talk about. And it also influences some of the resources and the training guides that we put online. We are really, really grateful for that. So that's it for this latest episode of the Wednesday Child podcast. Thank you again for listening. Please keep your messages coming in. Same email address as always. It's hello@wednesdayschild.co.uk. And we will see you again really, really soon. Thank you.